David, thank you very much for coming. How about a round?
Thank you, Dean. I want to thank the Dean and thank Dean McKnight and Laura Ehrlich, who wrote the article in Bostonia. And it's great to be here at CGS, which was CBS. And I actually sat on the real marble, the one you have your marble named after. It was the marble staircase in the old school. Before we start, I want to introduce you to my dad.
Two people on each side. I was laying in top, sleeping in top. And one morning, I start pushing my night, almost fall down. So I pushed him back, but I couldn't push him. And I saw it's like he doesn't move, he doesn't answer me. So I moved the right sideways, and I take a look. He has the mouth is clogged, and the image. Breath sticks out from his mouth, and he's dead. I said, oh my God. Look, I didn't know what to say. I figured I waited till the morning and tell the blockheads that there's a dead body there. But meantime, I will not want to see. I ripped out the piece of bread and swallowed myself right away. But to take out the rest of bread, I did not know that at that party, when the teeth was all together, I couldn't pull out. But I ripped it apart, and I took out the bread with my finger, and I ate it up. I buy bread. It's like a day life over there.
That was in 1988 in Auschwitz, where this whole story really started for me. And we'll go through this together. It doesn't have an end yet, and hopefully you'll get a sense of how powerful these events have become. Nowy Dwor was my father's, our ancestral home. It's a suburb of Warsaw. It's like Sharon would be to Boston, commuting distance away. They even have commuter rail back and forth. It was populated by Jews starting in the 1700s who were escaping the pogroms. And you can see to the west, Lithuania, Belarus, the Ukraine, and Russia, in the early 1800s that forced the Jews out of Russia and into Poland. Here are the stats. I'm not going to read you. You can read the slides. I'm going to talk to you while you're reading the slides. I won't insult your intelligence. The Jewish community in Nowy Dwor was vibrant and an integral part of the larger community of the city. More than half of the community was Jewish during the 20s and 30s. They were city councilors, they were in government. It was a very integrated community. One time they held more than half of the elected offices in town. It also was, in the first part of the 20th century, the technical Jewish publication center of Europe. More than 10,000, this is not religious stuff, these were technical books, novels, all kinds of publications that went throughout Europe. And there were 4 different publishing houses here in Nowy Dwor that produced that. We all know what happened in 1939. You know the story, and it wasn't unique to Nowy Dwor. It happened all over the place. In Germany, in Austria, wherever the Nazi machine got a hold. In May of 1940, they created the Nowy Dwor ghetto. My father and siblings were forced to move out of their house into the ghetto. My grandfather at that time had already died, so he wasn't part of the Holocaust. My grandmother was forced to flee to the Warsaw ghetto, where she ultimately died. In 1941, the Nazis performed a selection in the ghetto, and they only left the people who could work. The rest were sent to die at a nearby camp called Pomehovik. We all know about the Auschwitz and the Dachau's and the Bergen-Belsens. There were 1,000 smaller camps all over Germany and Poland and Austria. And we'll talk about it later. This was just 15 minutes away from Nowy Dwor. In November and December of 1942, the ghetto was liquidated, with the remaining Nowy Dwor Jews, about 4,000, transported to Auschwitz. My father and 7 siblings, brothers and sisters, were part of that transport. He was the only one to make it out, the only survivor. In 1939, there were about 4,500 Jews. When we were there in 1988, there weren't any. As a child growing up, my parents didn't talk about the Holocaust, and neither did any of the other survivors. They were a family who gathered together. We came to Boston as opposed to going to Ellis Island because we had sponsors. My mother's family lived in Dorchester and I think in Framingham in those days, and they sponsored us to come to the U.S. But they didn't talk about it until I was about 12 or 13. And then all of a sudden, they began to talk about their experiences. And my sense is it's because it was now far enough away. And if those of you who have studied the Holocaust understand the horrors of what happened there, it's PTSD, logarithmically, the horrors of what happened there. My dad was among a group of Auschwitz survivors called millionaires. They were millionaires because the number on the arm was under 1 million, early in. His number was 83522. Millionaires who were early in and survived were among the rarest of the survivors. What kept them alive? My grandfather was a blacksmith. My father had manual skills. They used him as a bricklayer. They did muscle, he was very strong. They did muscle experiments on his arms. They did sterilization experiments, which clearly didn't work. And he had AB negative blood, the rarest blood type. They bled him for the German soldiers. They bled him every week. And when he was too weak, they threw him out under the barracks. And when he crawled back out and was strong enough again, they bled him some more. Germans never knew they were getting Jewish blood. But that's what kept him alive. My mother was not in the camps. She has a very different story, and you'll find, and she's still very much with us. She was 13, lived in a town on the western border of Poland, and she was on a girlfriend's farm next door, Gentile family. While she was there, the Nazis came and took her mother, father, and sister. Never saw them again. The family kept her on the farm for 3 years. She became a Catholic, went to church, learned catechism. They billeted the German soldiers on the camp. On the farm, she fed them breakfast in the morning. At the end of the 3 years, they wanted to adopt her, and she said, "No, I think I have family in Salzburg, in a DP camp." So at 16, she went by herself from Western Poland to Salzburg, Austria, went to the DP camp, where my father had been liberated from Auschwitz. 2 orphans. They had mutual friends. They were married 3 days later. She was 16. My mother is 87 this year. I'm going to be 70. You do the math. This was Nowy Dwor at the turn of the century. You're looking at the central square, which today is very beautiful, like the Boston Common. It was the soccer fields when my father was growing up. He played on the plywood factory soccer team. And he was left wing, or in Yiddish, the left Fliegel. And as I said, this is part of a very rich Jewish culture going back into the 1800s. We went to Nowy Dwor as part of this trip in '88, and quite by accident, we're walking down the street, he meets this guy, and the two of them face each other and start crying. And they're jabbering in Polish to each other, and I said, what is this all about? When they created the ghetto, this guy, who was on the soccer team with my dad, came at night and threw food over the fence. And then one night he didn't come anymore. And my father said, like all the other Gentiles, they've forgotten about us. And what had happened is he got caught throwing the food over the fence, spent 3 months in a concentration camp. And by the time he got out, my father was gone. Took us to his house, we met his brother, sat with his wife, they were singing old school songs together, and my father said, I want to go see where my father is buried. He said, no you don't. He says, I really want to see my father. He says, you really don't want to go there. He insisted, and we went, and this is what we saw. The cemetery, after the Jews had been evacuated, was used by the Nazis as a gravel pit. They mined the sand, caskets and all. They took the headstones out, as they'd done in many cemeteries in Poland at that time, and used them under the roads to create a strong base for the tanks and trucks. This is what we saw when we were there. There were more than 700 headstones that were gone. The graves were open. Some had open caskets, some still had bones in them. We said Kaddish, prayer over the dead, and we found a baby's skull and brought it back. That was a story in itself. When you're bringing back bones and ashes, that's not the kind of stuff you can get through customs. And we were concerned about that. As we left in the airport in Warsaw, the customs agent said, were you, and we have these pins we were wearing that were part of the group. He said, are you part of the group of survivors? My father started crying, and he just said, go. When we got to New York, at the other end, was a group of survivors. The customs agent just said, welcome back. Just let us through. We live in Sharon, Mass., near Sharon Memorial Park. The park gave us a grave, and we took that skull and bones and ashes, and we gave it a burial and a plaque like every other one. And that's where they rest today. We came home from Poland in '88, and my father said, we have to do something about this. And we didn't quite know what we were going to do about it, but in the midst of that, within 3 weeks, he had a major heart attack, quadruple bypass surgery, and it sort of began to fall off the radar screen. Within 2 years after that, he ended up with colon cancer. He's never been sick a day in his life. And had a resection, the bag, wore that for a year. And when he finally healed from that, he developed early onset Alzheimer's, which took him in 2001. So this was gone from our minds. In 2009, I get a call from a guy in Texas, says, our grandfathers were partners in the blacksmith shop at Nowy Dwor. I'm coming to Boston for a medical convention. Can we get together? And so I picked him up at the Sheraton here, took him to the house, showed him the films from 1988. He said, I'm going to Berlin on business next month. I'm going to go to Nowy Dwor, see what's going on. He called me from Poland and said nothing has changed. 1988, 2009, it's still abandoned. They're still taking sand out of it. Public Works is still using it. And I said, we've got to do something about that. So Zev, his brother Joseph, is from Israel, and I created a 501c3. Joseph went from Israel, began talking to the mayor in the city. They gave us some security, and our goal was just to put a fence around the cemetery. Just make sure it isn't destroyed anymore. So we raised enough money, it's about $40,000 for the fence, and began working on that. At the same time, when Joseph was working with the mayor, they found that the Jewish records from Nowy Dwor had been moved before the war from City Hall to the county seat and hadn't been taken by the Nazis. All the Jewish records, births, deaths, marriages, were in the county seat. We went through them, we scanned them. I've traced my family back to 1832 so far, and we keep going back. This is actually my grandfather's birth certificate, and my cousin Zvika's mother's birth certificate from those records. We've scanned them. My grandson, Zach, who's up on the balcony taking pictures, who's, by the way, taking a tour of the school after this. I hope he can go here. Maintains our website, and we post these on the website, and we're trying to put them in a searchable database, which is a major project by itself. So we began working on fencing the cemetery, and at the same time they were building the new Jewish museum in Warsaw. And Rabbi Michael Shudrick, who's the Grand Rabbi of Poland, got involved with us in the project, and they took all of the excavation from the hole to build this museum, and they gave it to us. Hundreds of truckloads, trucked about 25 miles. This photo was taken in July 12, 2011, and since then the museum is opened. It is not a Holocaust museum. It is a museum of Jewish culture in Poland, and if you get there, it's a marvelous place. It was sort of strange and anticlimactic to have whole dirt from a Jewish museum replacing the dirt that the Nazis stole. So here they are, delivering the dirt, grading out the hole. We couldn't fill the whole thing up. It was impossible. And there you see them building the fence. When they were doing this, the city was doing utility work 2 streets away, and they uncovered a headstone. They stopped, got different equipment out, and began pulling up more headstones. The picture on the lower left, it's Joseph Kialashek from Israel, Rabbi Shudrick. In the back is Michael Norrod, who owns a local travel agency, who's become a major custodian of what we're doing, and my partner Zev, and then a worker. We pulled up a dozen of them. Buried for 70 years, amazingly good condition. They were beautiful. The mayor said to us, okay, we know sort of where they are now, but I'm not digging up perfectly good streets looking for headstones. We said, thank you very much. You've done this for us, that's fine. So here are the ceremonies for the groundbreaking for the fence. This is where the story gets kind of interesting. Barney Frank, who I've known for many years, has followed the project. He said, what can I do to help you? I can't give you money, I'm a congressman. He was a congressman then. I said, would you send a letter to the mayor saying thank you for what you're doing? And he did. And he sent a letter signed by 5 members of Congress to Mayor Kowalczyk and Nowy Dwor. And they read the letter at the groundbreaking, and it was picked up by Polish national television. And a week later, they were digging up perfectly good streets looking for more headstones. Politics in action. We now had 125 of them. What do you do with them? Couldn't put them back where they had come from because it was a hole. No one knew where they were. So we decided that we were going to build a wall and mount them on the wall as a monument for the ages. And we began that project immediately. In 2011, we came to Poland for the dedication of that wall. I'd been to Auschwitz before. My wife Nancy and Zach came with us. My niece Jamie, who's here, came with us. My brother came with us. We had people from Israel and South Africa and Australia. None of them had been to Auschwitz before. I felt it was important that we go there first to get a sort of a basis of why we were doing what we're doing. So here we are at the famous Arbeit macht free fence gate at Auschwitz. I was there in '88, and it wasn't as pretty as this. And if you go there today, it's sort of a Holocaust Disneyland. Everything is very clean. You go through with headphones for the tours. When I went through in '88 with my dad, even then he said, it didn't look like this. And as the guide gave us the canned tour, he said, no, it didn't happen like that. And I have a whole different presentation on that particular trip. But here you see the double electric fence, and that's where my dad talked about seeing them in the morning, shutting off electricity to take the bodies off the fence, because people who were despondent would run at the fence at night and commit suicide. And every morning they shut the fence off, take off the bodies. Pictures on the upper right are children. When you got off the train, on the transport, if you could do any kind of work, you went to the right, you were kept alive. You went to the left, you went right to the ovens. The Germans were known for being great record keepers, and we tried to get the names of all the people from Nowy Dwor who died in the Holocaust. If you went to the left, there were no records. You went to the right, you got tattooed, there was a record of your birth and all of your entry and all of that. Lower left was called the Wall of Death. This is where they would line people up 4, 5, and 6 deep and shoot them with one bullet, because bullets were expensive. Then here we are going into the barrack that my father was in, barrack number 8, and this is the little gas chamber. Auschwitz was 2 camps. Auschwitz was the work camp. Birkenau was the death camp. They're about a mile apart. And they'd go back and forth between the two of them. It had one little crematory and one gas chamber that still remains. When the Germans were fleeing Auschwitz, they blew up the 2 gas chambers and crematories that were there. If you've been to the Holocaust Museum in D.C., you've seen smaller versions of this. Each of these displays is a room that's about the size of this stage. One is just shoes. One is just prosthetics, arms and legs and crutches. One was suitcases. One was just hairbrushes, pots and pans. Millions of pieces of that. When people got off the transport, they took their luggage away, and being told they would get them later. Of course, they never did. Here we are in the gas chamber at Auschwitz. All the shower heads were still there, and these are the ovens. And below left, you can see the one of the blown-up gas chambers, the Birkenau. One of the things that also kept my father alive was he was among a group of people called Sonderkommandos. Those are the people who, when the ashes came out of the ovens, sifted through them and picked out the gold, the glasses, whatever didn't get burnt, they picked out. That's why they were called survivors. So on we went to Nowy Dwor. Looks just like our signs, just in a different language. We saw the remnants of the old town. This is the last building in the ghetto. And in 2014, it burned down. 2 people died in that, but there are now no more buildings in Nowy Dwor that are evident of the ghetto's existence. The rest of it looks like what you see here on the right: new apartment buildings, new office buildings, new stores. Nowy Dwor is, for your point of reference, Belmont. It's a suburb of a big city, but standalone as well. Near Nowy Dwor was the camp called Pomahovic. This was not monitored by the Nazis. This is where the sick people, the gangsters, the hoodlums, the worst people in the area could play without any rules. They took Jews and intellectuals and gypsies here, and they tortured them and killed them. No one kept an eye on what was going on. About 400,000 died here at Pomahovic. This was a fortress built by Napoleon 100 years or so before. It's in the ground, and the day we were there, it was 90 degrees out. You walked into that tunnel 50, 60 feet, you could see your breath. It was cold. And they kept people in there winter and summer locked up, no heat, no food, no water, till they died. There were 1,000 of these during the Holocaust all over the place. We went from there finally back to Nowy Dwor. There's Jamie on the lower left. The mayor set out for us in the community center a kosher dinner, and this is where people came from all over the world, and as well as citizens of Nowy Dwor, to celebrate the dedication of the wall, which is going to take place the next day. They had an evening of celebration. That choir has no Jews among them. They sang in Polish, they sang in Yiddish, they sang in Hebrew. They sang beautifully. We had a lecture by a professor from the University of Warsaw on the history of the Jewish population of Nowy Dwor. And that's a 2-hour PowerPoint if you ever want to see that one. And we had Avram Shul, who is 92 years old. I think my father would have been that this year, who is alive, still lives in California, and came and talked about his childhood experiences in Nowy Dwor. The more important, as part of all that we were doing, we started a competition in the high school, tolerance essay competition. And this first year, we had 32 or 33 kids write these essays. And we gave prizes. The first prize winner got $1,500 scholarship. The school got $750. Second prize was $1,000. The school got $500. Third prize was $500 and $250 to the school. It's amazing what you guys can do when you think about it, because Bartok Cheder here, 15 years old, wrote, this is the first winner, wrote a very profound essay, and if you got that handout, it's on the back. The most important part of what he wrote, which you can relate to today, was the last line. We must know that xenophobia, bigotry, nationalism, and hostility towards all the others are actions which sooner or later will lead every society to nothing. If you guys watch CNN, you see this every day. It's happening here, it's happening now. So, the next day we went to dedicate the wall. This is the first time I ever saw it. And putting my hand on that stone that had been buried for 70 years, and knowing that it was my family and my cousins and Zev, and it was only through our efforts that these even existed. I lost a very profound moment. I just lost it completely. Here we are, starting to do the ceremonies. You can see the staircase going up. That's the hole we couldn't fill. Up on top, there's about 4 acres of what's left of the cemetery, and we left it as it was. There's Zach on the right coming down the stairs. I'm on the lower left taking ashes that we took from the ash pit at Auschwitz and burying them in a Jewish cemetery here. Here is the front of the wall. These are Israelis looking at it. We found cousins of ours on the stones we've recovered. We found the town midwife. They wrote something about her on her headstone. We found the town brewmeister. And these people found an uncle. This is the back of that wall. We made sure that no piece wasn't taken care of, so even the small broken pieces are on there. The contractor did a marvelous job. To this day, I don't know how he mounted them. You can't see bolts. You can't see anything. They just are hanging on that wall. Even with all of these, we know there are 600 more out there. And we are trying now, and I'll talk about it later, they've actually are allowing us, if we can pay for it, use ground-piercing radar to start looking for more. These are the ceremonies. Again, the city helped us set up everything. We had people come here. People drove from France. People came in from England. They came from South Africa, Israel, large group from Israel, and all over the U.S. West Coast, East Coast, Texas, Florida, all over. This was an interesting day because that morning it was pouring rain. And as we drove from the hotel to Nowy Dwor, not only did the rain stop, we got a double rainbow. So somebody's watching over us. I'm there just giving my opening remarks, thanking everybody for being there. Michael Schweitzer was the president's chargé d'affaires, if you don't remember at that time. The president of Poland, his wife, entire entourage had been killed in a plane crash about 6 months before. This is the new president who had sent his chargé d'affaires to dedicate it and talk about Poland's support for what we're doing. It's Rabbi Shudrik, the Grand Rabbi of Poland. He talked about the fact that this was, at one time, such a terribly terrible cemetery. It was among the worst that he knew about in Poland, and since we've done what we've done, it had become one of the best. And Israeli Ambassador Ravner made an interesting comment. He said, you know, people come here all the time. They come to their towns, they come to the cemeteries, they see everything is a mess, and they call me and they complain about it. And then they go home, and nothing happens. He said, this is one of the few times you complained about it, but you did something about it. And that by itself was very, very different. Bill Haidt, who was the United States Chargé d'Affaires, the actual ambassador to Poland from U.S. ambassador to Poland, was going to be there. He actually had to fly to Africa that week, so he couldn't be there. And he talked about the long cultural history between the U.S. and Poland. And finally, Mayor Kowalski, who is one of our strongest supporters, talked about the fact that this country and this city had been invasion, succession over the centuries and bounced back. The sad part was, in the last bounce back, the Jews who were gone never came back, because they were gone. And how he hoped that the symbolism of this would at least create a nexus, a connection to the Jewish population. One quick story for him. My wife, that was the year that the Red Sox won the World Series. We bought a dozen hats to give to people, and we gave the mayor a Red Sox hat. He said, thank you very much, I'm a Celtics fan. So I called my brother here. We sent him a Celtics hat. One of the things that happened after these ceremonies was Zev and I said, you know, what we've done is to honor the memory of those people who died before the Holocaust. But what about the ones who died in the Holocaust? There's nothing here that even talks about them. And if you're Jewish, you go to a temple, there's a memorial wall in the hall of the temple. We have all the names of the people, and they light the light up when it's the Yortzeit time. And so we said we have to do a memorial to those who died in the Holocaust. And so we posted on the website. We put up a virtual wall. People emailed us, gave us their names, and Zach posted them on the virtual wall. We wanted a real one. We started raising funds and built a virtual wall, built a real wall. This is the centerpiece, this headstone. It's written in 3 languages, and it says, the people who are remembered here were among the Jewish citizens of Nowy Dwor who perished in the Holocaust. They have no graves. We honor their lives and bring them home to be with their families and friends once more. This was a separate one. Alan Connect did this for his grandfather, and it says, after Aaron Lieb Connect buried 28 Jewish victims in the Jewish cemetery, a Gestapo soldier asked him, how many? Aaron replied, 28. The soldier shot him and said, now there's 29. Here's the wall section that has my family on it, my cousin Tzvika's family on it. You have a sense of the scale of it. And this is, the headstones are on one side, so when you walk in between them, you're enveloped by all that's going on there. Once again, ceremonies, the kids involved. Again, from the UK and the US, France, Africa, South Africa. And once again, we had the essay contest. This is now in its 5th year, and it's grown from just the schools in Nowy Dwor to the schools in the county. There are now many, many more kids. Their social studies teacher in the school system and the superintendent are deeply involved in what we're doing there in this essay program. In addition to that, the city of Gedera, Israel, that year sent 125 kids to Nowy Dwor for a 3-day conference on tolerance. It was so successful, they've done it 2 more times, and they're going to do it again this year. And you have Polish kids and Israeli kids together, meeting each other. Again, these kids had never seen Jews before. And this is what it's all about. It's about you guys. Because the hatred in this world today is learned. The kids who are blowing themselves up in the Middle East aren't naturally destructive. They are taught to hate. It's only when you carry the message of the other side with you, will it ever end? This is the combined group in 2014, half Polish, half Israeli, and they keep going. They talk to each other, they communicate with each other, and Gedera keeps sending them every year because it's a wonderful program. This was my dad, who very early on was involved in the anti-Nazi, anti-Holocaust program. When the movie Exodus first opened, it was picketed by anti-Semitic groups. He was there fighting with them physically and spent a lot of time in the press trying to promote recognition of the horrors of the Holocaust. So what's going to happen from now forward? We've got 4 things we're trying to do. One is we're trying to raise money to find more headstones, build a second wall, retrieve them, get them back. Second, we're trying to expand the program with the kids on the essay contest and let it expand throughout Poland if we can do that. Third, we're trying to, again, take all of these records that we have, translate them, and make them into a searchable database so that if you have a relative, you can just look at the last name, find it in the original language. By the way, between 1900 forward, it was in Polish. 1900 back, it's in Russian. So you can tell how the country's changed. My mother tells a story, and I know we're running late, but she spoke 5 languages fluently. She said, I'd wake up in my bed in the morning, and I'd be in a different country, and my bed didn't move. And that's what happened to Poland. And fourth, to continue this program of trying to get kids together. We tried at one time to get Solomon Schechter to send some kids over, and of course they had some financial issues. The Israelis continue to send people over, and it's this meeting of minds, meeting of people that were all the same, that's critical to the future of who we all are. This is the partisan song, and the last line is the most important one. Through all the centuries, we're here. Never forget these last lines, because in these troubled times in the Middle East and around the world where anti-Semitism and other kinds of intolerance, it's not just anti-Semitism, is once again crawling out from under the slime and the rocks. It's always been there. It's like a virus. You can't kill it. It's always going to be there. You have to fight it. And ladies and gentlemen, you guys are the ones who can do it. Thank you. Any questions?
Thank you very much, Dave. If you have questions, feel free to come up to the microphone and you can ask, and everyone will be able to hear it.
No? Someone asked at lunch, we were concerned about the change in government in Poland because their recent elections have moved them to the right. And the answer is yes, that's a concern. You see the rumblings of intolerance sort of coming up again. You know, it's not quite anti-Semitic yet, but it's anti-people who are not like us. And so we're concerned about it, but we have this wonderful relationship in Nowy Dwor with the mayor and the citizens. They've actually created a written walking tour of the Jewish Nowy Dwor. So we just keep our heads down and keep going. But we are concerned about the fact that the city is doing things for us that they're not doing for the other cemeteries in town, and they're trying to raise funds to do things like cut the grass and keep things clean. The cemetery's locked, by the way, and City Hall has the only key. So if someone wants to go visit, they go to City Hall. We're just trying to keep vandalism from becoming an issue. The wall was put a distance away from the fence, so you couldn't, spray graffiti on it. I mean, they have the same stuff there as we do in this country normally. It's not just anti-Semitism, just vandalism. So we've tried to deal with all of that. But the government is changing, and the world is moving towards more intolerance, as it looks like it may be doing in this country as well. And that concerns me very much. That's it.
Thank you. I'm Professor Sweeting, the chair of the Humanities Division. I want to thank you for first of all, a lovely lunch earlier and a great talk. And I know our students really appreciated it. My question is, you know, with the number of Holocaust survivors decreasing by the day, there can't be too many left in the United States. I'm wondering, you know, these physical reminders of the Holocaust, you know, as the actual memories sort of fade and literally go into extinction with each day, how important is it, not just in this town, but elsewhere in Poland, in Lithuania, and Belarus, to resurrect, if there are other sort of physical reminders out there besides, you know, the places like Auschwitz, but these small little towns? Are there other places like this where people are working to sort of make sure that there is some physical reminder that can continue on into to future generations? Are there analogous projects?
Yes, there are several dozen other efforts to do this exact same thing in other villages and towns throughout Poland. There's a group out of Florida dealing with one. We tend to talk to each other once in a while. There is a central organization in Poland that has a website and publishes who's doing what on a regular basis. So there is that movement. I think that the Spielberg project, among other things, where you video and have the actual, you saw my dad, you know, he wasn't acting. And there's hours more of that in the crematory, in the gas chambers, in the all through Auschwitz and Birkenau. Zach made an interesting comment at lunch today. He's studying at the high school. They're doing World War II and the Holocaust now, and they talked about a visual of the pond that was at Birkenau, and you saw a picture of a pond where the blown up gas chamber was, and because he'd been there, he said, "That's not a pond. That's an ash pit. That's where the bones that came out of the crematory were dumped." And the people in the class sort of didn't have a perspective. And that's the kind of thing we're talking about. That's where I said, when you go and do the Auschwitz tour now, it's sanitized. You really can't see. You know, there's a video of my father standing with the curator at Auschwitz saying, you know, I stood right here and I watched my brother hang right there. You can't do that with a book, and you can't do that with a PowerPoint. So the living testimony, I think what Spielberg did was absolutely fantastic, to get a video living testimony of as many as, both of my parents were part of the Spielberg project. The fact that the Holocaust Museum exists in D.C., and you can walk through and see the actual rail car, you can see the videos of the actual torture, is a great testament. I find that when I go to the Holocaust Monument in Boston, and you know, those numbers are not numbers, they're random numbers, 6 million random numbers. But you watch people walking through there and you listen, they don't know what they're looking at. There really isn't a sense. And it's a very moving monument, you know, with the idea of the flames coming up from the ovens and the glass. It's a great piece. But as you watch people who don't connect to the Holocaust walk through it and listen to them, they don't really get it. You have to go through the museum in D.C., you have to go through Yad Vashem, the museum in Miami. There are many of them. There's one, I think, in Providence. You know, someone said that those who don't understand history are doomed to repeat it. And you watch what's happening in this country today, and I have a sense we're heading towards doom unless you guys do something about it. Because the cycle of intolerance is coming back. And it's very, very frightening. Anything else?
Mr. Wluka, during your talk, which was quite wonderful, I was thinking about an inscription I saw at the cemetery just outside the city of St. Petersburg in Russia. They have a huge cemetery with memorials to the 1 million Leningraders who died during the siege. And the inscription over the gate says, "No one and nothing is forgotten." which I always thought was the most beautiful possible way to approach it. So I knew a person whose parents both died in the siege, and when we talked about the cemetery, she said, what's important to me is that we can't bring these people back, but we can do them the justice to admit that they lived and that this is how they died. And everything about what you said today struck me as a really wonderful approach to doing just that. We cannot save these people, but at least we're insisting that they lived, they were individual people, and this is how they died.
Think of what would have happened if they hadn't died. There have been books written about what happened if the Holocaust didn't happen. I mean, these pictures, now, almost no one in that picture would be here today if my father hadn't survived. I wouldn't be here. He wouldn't be here. If one person hadn't survived. 6 million people died. What legacy was lost forever? What Einstein, what Schweitzer, what Salk, what Hawkins doesn't exist because of that? Think about that. You have a question? No? Okay. Thank you.
He'll be here for a few minutes if you want to come up to the stage and talk to him in person. Thank you very much.
Pretty amazing talk. I really
Thank you.
appreciate it. So this past weekend,